Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and here we are in this heavyweight contest between South Africa and South Australia. It's a heavyweight contest. You can see we've got two pugilists here representing their corners. We have Steve from South Africa and Dan from South Australia. Dan, tell me, what do you do in South Australia?
Well, Graham, thank you very much for having us today. As soon as Travel Mole put the bat signal out for two heavyweight destinations to come head to head, of course, South Australia was incredibly excited to be involved. So I'm Dan from South Australia Tourism. So I'm actually based in London in the UK. I look after Northern Europe and the UK and Ireland. But today I'm representing South Australia globally for wherever you're watching all over the world. Hopefully to teach you a thing or two about South Australia, and hopefully we can win this contest.
Steve, what do you do in South Africa? Same thing?
Well, yeah, pretty similar. Firstly, again, thanks so much for having us. Just like Dan from the other SA said, we also accepted the call after we saw the bat signal. Whether that bat was from South Australia or South Africa, we're not too sure. Could be one continent or the other. But yeah, so I'm the trade training specialist, South African tourism, also based in London in the UK. Just like Dan's accent, you can tell that neither of us are really from the UK. But I think we know a little bit about the destinations that we settle, even if we're not from there either. I look after the UK and Ireland, but again, today, just like Dan, we are talking globally.
Good. Well, as you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, this is a heavyweight contest. They're two massive destinations in Very good. They are two massive destinations in the Southern Hemisphere. Have lots of similarities. I've picked out just four, but straight away you can think of sport. They both wear green and gold. They both think they produce the best wine in the world. All of those sorts of things. But the things I would like them to concentrate once we get into it is, what sort of cities they have, the food and wine, of course, which is interesting, the nature and the wildlife, which is a big, huge pull these days, and of course, culture. However, for those of you who have never been there before, I'd like to know, how do you get there? So Steve, perhaps you can describe the best route to get to South Africa.
I can definitely do that. Thanks, Graham. Before I do, let's have a look at this lovely map just here. Good old South Africa. So if anyone hasn't been, or if anyone hasn't really sold much to their clients before, this is the country that we are talking about. This is one of the essays that we discussed today, which is quite good. You can see 11 official languages, 9 amazing provinces. Don't worry too much. Your clients aren't going to ask you to name all the provinces though. 3 capital cities, just to make things a little bit interesting due to history. Getting around South Africa is quite an easy thing to do as well. You've got self-drives, you've got fantastic railway journeys, domestic flights once you arrive, taxis and transfers are all around, including Uber, super cheap, which is great. Escorted trips, very popular. Maybe one day we'll have Virgin Galactic getting there as well. But that aside, getting into South Africa, you've got 3 big old cities in the Republic of South Africa. So you've got where this lovely little airplane's about to fly into just here. This is Johannesburg, OR Tambo International Airport, certainly the most frequented airport for travelers coming into the country. And then another little plane is about to drop into one of my favorite cities in South Africa, Durban, just here. And then one last plane is going to head down to the mother city. There you go. There's Cape Town just there. So these are the 3 main entry points. Now, if people are looking at this presentation from the UK or Europe, from North America, from South America, from Australasia, there are direct flights from all of these places going into at least one of these 3 cities, which is good to keep in mind. So once you get to South Africa, of course, you can start moving around, but that's how you get to South Africa.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that. And Dan, perhaps you can tell me the best routing to get to South Australia.
Yes, absolutely, Graham. Thank you for asking. Of course, before we talk about South Australia in depth, we need to get there. And luckily enough, it is so easy to get to South Australia. No matter where you are in the world, it just takes a day to get to Australia. So easy little doddle wherever you might be. Looking at the map of Australia itself, let's just distinguish where South Australia is. So right in the center of the country, the bottom half of the middle section, That is South Australia, that little dark bit that you can see there. And that is right in the center of everything for Australia. As you can see, we have some great wildlife, amazing coastline, as you can imagine, with that much seaside down to the south. But then obviously you need to get there from wherever you are in the world. We have direct routes through Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Auckland down in New Zealand as well. But then you can also get to us from other parts of Australia really easily. So if you happen to be coming from the United States, for instance, landing in on the East Coast, then it's a doddle to get over to Adelaide, which is our capital city. And that is the little star on your map there. So South Australia is quite large, but most of the tourism activity happens in the southeastern quarter surrounding the star where Adelaide is just there. That's air travel for you, but also because we're perfectly positioned in the middle of the country, really easy to reach us via self-drive. So the Melbourne to Adelaide self-drive route is really popular, for instance, or the Explorer's Way to and from Darwin, top to bottom. There's tons of different self-drives around our state and into other parts of Australia as well. Also rail travel. So Adelaide is actually Australia's hub for rail travel. It is the centre point for a cross-country rail journey from Perth to Sydney called the Indian Pacific. So from one ocean to the other, Indian to Pacific, and then also the Garn train as well, which travels from Darwin up to Adelaide. So, Darwin down to Adelaide and vice versa. So luxury, all-inclusive rail journeys, and Adelaide is the only city where you can actually reach them. So it's a great way to see large parts of the country in just a few days. So as you can see, right in the middle, and it's easy to include us as part of any other multi-stop itinerary in Australia. So whether you're coming from the west, the east, the north, or the south, Adelaide is in the center of it all, and South Australia is in the center of it all. So you can easily include us as part of that longer journey.
Cool. Well, and ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're listening very carefully to what these two gentlemen are saying, because there are prizes on offer all around the world, and the questions will be related to this very broadcast. So keep your eyes open and keep writing down if you need to, although there are lots of contacts, lots of web pages, social media, as you would expect. So let's get into a little bit into a bit more detail, Dan. City life in Australia, what's it like?
Wow, city life in South Australia, when we're talking about it, really, there's one major city that we like to talk about the most, and that is Adelaide, our beautiful capital. As you can see from this map, it's very green. We have a very, very green city. The whole CBD right in the middle there, that little city grid, is surrounded by parklands. We have our stunning Adelaide Oval, the Adelaide Central Market, and loads of laneways and arcades right in the middle of the city with loads of eateries, small bars and restaurants, lots of art and culture in the city as well. But one thing that is a major talking point of Adelaide is just how easy it is to get around and the accessibility. So we've seen how easy it is to get to South Australia. When you're in Adelaide, it's so easy to get to where you need to be. So as you can see from the map there, the beach is just 20 minutes drive away. The Adelaide Hills, which is a wine region all to itself, is just 20 minutes drive the other way. And then you've got the Adelaide Airport, just a 15-minute drive from the city. So it's so easy to get around. I've mentioned the arts and culture right in the CBD, but to each side of the city, you've got beaches to one side, beautiful green hills to the other. And then in the middle, you have this melting pot of arts, culture, food and wine, and so many different beautiful colors, as you can see from the map here. So plenty on offer in Adelaide.
So just to be clear, Stephen, looks like South Australia only have the one city. What do you got?
Goodness, it does, doesn't it? It looks like a pretty awesome city as well, Dan, but three to choose from. And these are just the major cities, of course. There's plenty of others in the 9 provinces. Dan, it looked pretty amazing. You had that really cool train trip that sort of goes from east to west. There's one that goes from north to south. I can't remember the names because I'm obviously not too familiar with that product, but you know, it's very similar to the blue train that we have. We've also got Rovos Rail that has a number of different rail journeys that go throughout Southern Africa and some fantastic driving routes as well. But getting between the cities, rail trips, driving routes aside, well, that's fair enough because you can actually fly from one to the other within 2 hours, which is quite good. That's the beauty of being a country that's relatively large, but not quite as big as continental countries out there, I guess. So beautiful Cape Town. When I think of Cape Town, I think of Table Mountain. You know, that's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. Photo here hasn't actually been taken from Cape Town looking up to the mountain. I've actually done it the other way around, just because I tend to find everyone sees the mountain in the background of the city, but this gives you a bit of an idea of the panoramic 360-degree view that you get if you get the chance to actually walk around there. It's only just under a 10-minute cable car to the top, rotates completely as you're going up, so everyone gets a chance to look at the views as well, which is quite impressive. But it's not just about Table Mountain. Going down to Cape Town, just like Adelaide, you know, you've got places that are all around this city as well. You've got beautiful Boulders Beach along the Chapman's Peak Drive. That's not too far a drive out of the city itself. Basically, from 15 minutes to about an hour and a half, you come across a lot of different things to see. At Boulders Beach, for example, you can just go and hang out with the penguins, the only species of penguin on the African continent, the African penguin. Robben Island, an amazing place, very, very moving place due to the history as well. Cape Point, not too far away. Joburg down there, I think it doesn't get too much of a rap sometimes, but it is definitely more than just a stopover. You know, if I was spending some time in Joburg, I'd go to Marbeneng, or Josie as they call it, Marbeneng, have a couple of craft beers, have a nice coffee, relax. Pretoria, one of the 3 capitals, is just to the north. Cradle of Humankind is absolutely amazing when we're talking about millions of years old, millions of years worth of human fossils. Constitution Hill, Soweto, which is one of the biggest townships in South Africa, and then good old Durban, one of my favorite places. You've got the Golden Mile, Florida Road, where all of the locals go and hang out. The Big Rush, one of the adventurous things that you can do in South Africa. It's a stadium swing. Loads of swimming because we're nice and warm on the Indian Ocean on the eastern side there, so it's warm all year round. You can drive through the Midlands, check out the Drakensberg mountain ranges. For any of the history buffs, they can go and check out the battlefields or go and hang out with the hippos in Hluhluwe Imfolosi National Park, just to the north. Whew. But the cities are pretty cool, but lots of things to do around the city as well.
Cool. Well, I hesitate to bring up my next subject because both Australia, South Australia and South Africa have been known to be a little bit snotty about their wine. It's the only wine in the world that's worth drinking. But seeing as you've got the flow, Stephen, perhaps you could tell me about the food and wine in South Africa.
Well, Graham, you know, as they say, in wine there is wisdom, in water there is just bacteria. So needless to say, I know my wine very, very well, that's for sure. If we're talking wine, particularly if we're talking wine just out of Cape Town, which was the first city I was talking about, a lot of people might know of the types of wine from there already. South African wine's really big all around the world. We've got fantastic quality stuff that's imported into whatever country you're listening to, which is great, or listening from, I should say, sorry. If we're talking white, a load of different grapes, but I tend to think of Chenin Blanc, and if we're talking red, I think of a nice, heavy, dense sort of wine with a delicious aftertaste as well, which is called a Pinotage. But that's about as far as my sommelier skills actually go on, but they are pretty impressive. Interestingly, South Africa is so well known for its wine that it has the oldest vines in the Southern Hemisphere, just outside of Cape Town. But the winelands, which is found around the Western Cape in the same place that Cape Town is, or the same province, isn't the only place. You've got wineries in the Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, loads of different other areas as well. And if we're talking about food to go with the wine, well, that's just a no-brainer. South Africa, 11 official languages, so you can imagine just how many different cultures and different influences occur in the Rainbow Nation. Bunny chow, just to the left of the screen here. This is a delicious curry that's brought because you have the highest population of Indians living outside of India due to history in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, mainly centered around Durban. This is one of their many delicious dishes. Biltong, malva pudding, shakalaka, a braai, which is the best way to have a barbecue. It is a barbecue. Baboti, Cook Sisters, Melt Tart. There's so many different pieces or lovely, delicious dishes that you can have in South Africa. And actually, sorry, not a country, a restaurant in South Africa last year was lucky enough to be voted the best restaurant in the world for 2019. It's a place called Wolfgat, just a couple of hours north drive of Cape Town. It's a very delicious place. But I tell you what, I think we've got some pretty decent food and wine to throw out there onto this.
I've had the pleasure of eating in South Africa on a number of occasions.
Excellent.
And yeah, absolutely. And I think that I've had probably the best curry I've had anywhere in the world in Cape Town. I've also had the unpleasant experience of eating biltong. So with that, I think I might move on to Dan in South Australia and see what South Australia's got to offer on the wine and food front.
Thank you, Graham, and thanks, Steve. That sounded fantastic. It almost sounded as good as what I'm about to show you. And that is the food and wine in South Australia, because boy, are you in for a treat when you visit Adelaide in South Australia. Adelaide really is known as a wine capital of the world, one of the great wine capitals of the world. It is a true melting pot of flavors, no matter where you go in the state. And then there's so many unique places to go and eat and drink as well. So if we start with that wine, I mean, when I talk about a wine capital of the world, let me just put this into context for you. Within an hour's drive from Adelaide, you can reach over 350 wineries, and over 200 of them, you can actually go to the cellar door and try the wine from the winemaker, which is a pretty stunning thing to have just right on the city's doorstep. And that goes out wider and throughout South Australia as well. We actually have 18 different wine regions. So plenty to keep you refreshed during your trip. In terms of the food as well, so the good wine, I mean, the premier wine that comes from places like the Barossa, McLaren Vale, the Clare Valley, or the Adelaide Hills, with that great wine comes great food as well. So we have plenty of modern Australian cuisine, influences from all across the world. So we take all of the chefs in South Australia will use local fresh ingredients, but they will use flavors and techniques from different parts of the world. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the paddock to plate experience, or the ocean to plate experience, with the fresh food from our local producers. But then you get those influences from everywhere in the world, including actually Africa. We have an award-winning African restaurant right in the center of Adelaide called Africola. So there you go, Steve, that is a little feather in your cap there.
I'll have to go and check it out, Dan.
Yes, no, I mean, that's just one of many, you know, whether you're looking for Asian cuisine, modern Australian, even a barbecue, you know, you're never too far away from a classic Aussie barbie. And then we have the unique places that I mentioned you can eat. So the stunning small bars and restaurants with lots of character in the city, but then you get out to our wine regions, and you can do that by day tour or overnight stays. But you can go to places like the Darrenberg Cube, which is on the right there. That is a 5-story high Rubik's Cube, plonked in the middle of a winery. That's 45 minutes south of Adelaide, so close to the city. And then you also have places like the Barossa Valley, 1 hour north of Adelaide, where you can find names like Jacobs Creek, Penfolds, or Wolfblass. And then around the whole state, and including places like the Barossa, you have boutique wineries that you can go in behind the scenes, meet the winemakers. And again, you can enjoy that as part of a day trip from Adelaide or overnight stay as well. So
okay, well, I think we've established that you can do some wine, both of you. There's no doubt of that. Now, I did notice earlier that there was a picture of a vineyard with a kangaroo halfway down it. I'm assuming that means that South Australia has got a reasonable effort in terms of wildlife. What can I see? What can I witness?
That's right. And that'll take us on to the next category, I guess. So nature and wildlife is something else we do so well in South Australia. You mentioned you saw kangaroos within the vines, and you absolutely can. Out on a day tour, you can always spot a roo or two within the vineyards. But we actually have our own island named after kangaroos, and that's called Kangaroo Island, of course. So
very
nature and
wildlife.
Exactly. So when I talk about nature and wildlife, I'm just going to talk about 3 key regions and a few other things in South Australia. And you can't talk about wildlife in SA without talking about Kangaroo Island. So it is a 30-minute flight away from Adelaide, or you can reach it by car and ferry as well, just 2.5 hours, the whole journey from Adelaide. So really easy to reach. It is a wildlife haven, first and foremost, but it is also an island paradise and so much more as well. Like the food and wine there is great, the natural scenery, but make no mistake about it, people go for the wildlife experiences. And that is where you can get up close to native wildlife in the wild. So they nickname it a zoo without fences, and it's pretty much that. It's just a big wildlife park that you can go out with the tour guides, spot wildlife, and yeah, you're within a few feet from kangaroos, or walking along the beach with sea lions at Seal Bay Conservation Park, seeing koalas in the trees, or looking out to the ocean where you see dolphins, seals, and there's just so much more around the whole island. Speaking of sea life, we have a region to the west of Adelaide called the Eyre Peninsula, and it's a proper, true aquatic playground. And this is where you can go swimming with sea lions or swimming with wild dolphins. There's stunning coastal beauty out here as well. So obviously wildlife will be a key driver, but the natural scenery is absolutely stunning. And then we go from that sort of blue ocean all the way to our outback as well. So the Aussie outback is a very, very iconic place when we, for anyone traveling, and a place called the Flinders Ranges, which is just 4.5 hours drive north of Adelaide, is where we like to send people for the quintessential Aussie outback experience. Epic landscapes, beautiful, stunning wildlife, and big, wide open spaces to explore as well. And it's not just those three regions, there's absolutely so much more. We've got over 5,000 kilometers of stunning coastline with beautiful beaches. You can go cruising on the Murray River, which is Australia's longest river. There's walking itineraries, there's even pink lakes, and it's all so close to Adelaide. So you can see from this map here just how easy it is to get to these regions I'm mentioning. And any of these regions, the Eyre Peninsula, Kangaroo Island, Flinders Ranges, or the wine regions, you do need a couple days to really experience them properly. But we like to talk about nature and wildlife and getting out with the local guides. So if you're on a self-drive, great. We always recommend a day tour or a multi-day tour to see them. And if you're familiar with South Africa and what a safari and lodge experience is like there, that's pretty much what you get in South Australia as well, with stunning, unique and boutique accommodation, that paired with local guides taking you to places you can't reach on your own. That's the kind of experience you get in South Australia as well when you go out and see the nature and wildlife there. So it is a true wildlife destination that, yeah, hopefully we can show many more people in the future when travel gets going again.
Well, it's a good effort, but it's got to be pretty good to beat South Africa on wildlife.
Well, look, I hear that South African wildlife is best in the world, as said by me anyway. I've been lucky enough to see the odd bit of Aussie wildlife from time to time, as you could probably guess by my accent. But I'll tell you what, there's something about going out on a South African safari. Doesn't matter where you are, if you're in a private game reserve, if you're in a national park, somewhere else, and you're up close and personal with animals that are completely wild in their own natural habitat, and these particular animals are towering above you. It is very, very impressive, and it reminds us of our place within the world, I think. Going out, you can also go to a Big 5 game reserve. Dan's talked a bit about safari. The Big 5 is always important in South Africa. If you go there, people want to see the buffalo. They want to see, because believe it or not, that's one of the Big 5, the lion, the rhino, the elephant, and then a very elusive one as well. Graham, you've done a few safaris in South Africa. Do you know what that 5th of the Big 5 is?
So you've mentioned buffalo, giraffe, elephant.
Not giraffe, not part of the Big 5, I'm afraid.
I can't remember now.
That's all right. This one's very elusive. This one's very elusive, but actually it's in this presentation.
Oh, it's the leopard.
Right. Yeah, it's the leopard. They never change their spots, those things.
I was about to say kangaroo. I thought that might have been involved, but
Look, you're pretty close. Both mammals, but very different streams of mammals and from different continents. But no, I'm glad you checked that, Dan. Absolutely. But of course, if you're not doing a Big 5 safari and the Big 5 aren't on a particular game reserve that your clients are going to, so that means that no carnivores are there, then you've got the opportunity to do something a little bit more adventurous. You're not just checking out the wildlife, but you're checking out the landscape as well. And boy, is the landscape and the scenery amazing in South Africa. So as you can see, you can go quad bike riding with giraffes if you want, go fishing in some of the most stunning scenery in the world. So this fishing just here that you can see, this water is coming from an amazing place in KwaZulu-Natal. It's called Tugela Falls. It's actually the second highest waterfall in the world, which is quite impressive. And that's the beautiful Drakensberg mountain ranges behind there. We got the penguins that I mentioned. This is one of my favorite photos because it looks like they're about to drop an album. If it's about 2001, I'm picturing a rap duo there, which is quite cool. The rhinos, of course, say no more. Very, very important there. But the wildlife in general is just brilliant. And every experience that you have there is completely different. Now, just very, very quickly as well, if you're doing a safari in South Africa, a lot of people will do the panorama route or the beautiful garden route first, do a few days driving, self-drive, or they can get taken around, and then they'll rest and relax, and they'll check out some of those amazing lodges, just like you have in South Australia as well, but they'll be checking out some of the African wildlife, of course. The idea of a private game reserve gets people excited from time to time. You normally have your stock standard dawn game drive, dusk game drive. Everything in between is you being more or less hand-fed food, relaxing. Basically, you have to put your back into taking it easy as well as admiring all of that wildlife out there.
Cool. Just before we finish, just briefly, both nations have had their influx of outsiders, Europeans mainly, but not exclusively. How is the cultural background? How does it manifest itself, if you like, in some of the experiences you can have?
For me, I would say South Africa really is known as the Rainbow Nation. And I'm sure some people that are watching this certainly know that prior to 1994, South Africa was a very different place as well. 26 years of democracy as of this year, and democracy for all, of course. So when I see South Africa, I see that European influence. I see that influence from the Zulu, from the Xhosa, from the Afrikaners, from the Tonga, from everyone that sort of lives around there. The oldest culture for modern humans is for South Africa anyway, of course. I don't want to take away from what Dan's going to say soon. But that's the Khoisan people, and evidence of them is all around. A lot of the Khoisan actually are still alive. They show you around lots of different beautiful areas, particularly up in the Drakensberg mountain ranges there. But also, you don't just have African culture or the mixture of European culture, you've got modern South African culture as well. And that is a true melting pot of everyone that lives in this Rainbow Nation coming together. And obviously that means people go out on boat trips all the time. That's why I put that photo just there. I've been fortunate enough to travel to South Africa more than 10 times. And every time I go, I learn and discover something new about the culture. 11 official languages just makes you realize just how much is out there. But Toko is probably one of the most warmest and inviting people you'll have. And that is universal. South Africa, it doesn't matter what the background or the culture is. People are so proud of their country, where they're from. They want to tell you about it. They want to tell their story and make sure you have an amazing experience. Toko, she's Zulu. I call her my Zulu queen, and she takes us around the Zulu kingdom, which is partly the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and she tells you all about her culture. And it's one of those memories that you never, never lose. But she's one of many people out there. Culture is a very big part of every South African.
I presume, Dan, only one language in South Australia, and that's Strine, isn't it?
Well, not quite, Graham. And there's plenty of different languages in South Australia and in Australia in general, actually. And when we're talking about culture in Australia and South Australia, we can't go past, of course, the Indigenous and Aboriginal culture that has existed for over 60,000 years in Australia, and that is technically considered the oldest continuously living culture as well. Over 120 languages are still spoken in Australia. There were over 250 back when European settlement came in the 1700s. But yeah, I mean, what it's all about is Really, when people holiday in Australia and South Australia, getting in touch with that Indigenous culture is a really important thing, I think. And you can do that in a variety of different places throughout South Australia. So within Adelaide, for instance, we have cultural centres, the art gallery and museum, great places to go out and get a little bit of that Indigenous culture as well. The South Australian Museum actually has the largest collection of Aboriginal artifacts in the world. And as I mentioned, with a city like Adelaide with lots of art and lots of culture, lots of art and food, you get those Indigenous influences as well. But going out away from the city, getting out to our regions is where you can go out on tours in wilderness areas with local Aboriginal guides who can show you regions where their ancestors have lived for thousands of years, and they are carrying on telling that great, beautiful story that, you know, it never disappoints when you're out in these regions. So you can hear all about how their ancestors have lived for, again, thousands of years. You can hear about Dreamtime stories. You can find out how they've lived off the land over this time as well. So Indigenous culture is really important to us, and showcasing that in the right way as well. But as Steve mentioned, there is plenty in Adelaide and South Australia as well. There's plenty of different cultures that we really like to celebrate. And a great way to do that is through our festivals and events. So through art and food, we absolutely get that. It's a multicultural place, Adelaide and South Australia, and then through our festival season as well. So year round, there are world-class events and festivals, but particularly from February through to April each year, this is where you can experience Adelaide's festival season. We have things like WOMAD, Tasting Australia, which is a festival of food, and the Adelaide Fringe as well, which is the second largest fringe festival in the world of its kind after Edinburgh. And it is a really great time to be in the city. It's very vibrant, absolutely buzzing, and that takes place from February through to March each year. So through the art and food and the events, I think culture is a really a great thing we're able to show off all throughout the year. And our art scene, as you can see, is absolutely thriving. Plenty of colour in and around Adelaide and South Australia.
Marvellous. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've been given the evidence. You have listened to the boys, to the pugilists. If you need any more information, then here are our links. If you look at the comments, it will show you how you can enter the draw, and there will be some questions that you will need to answer that would have been pertinent to this actual broadcast. And I just thank you very, very much for listening. And Dan, Steve, fantastic, well done. I'm not going to say who I think is going to win. All I know is they will have South in the front of their name.
Well,
but in order for me to really decide, I think I'm probably going to have to next year visit both, and then I'll give you my decision.
Well, we can't wait to welcome you into Adelaide and South Australia. As you mentioned, there are links there for us. So for South Australia, you can find so much more info at trade.southaustralia.com. And our training module is found on the Aussie Specialist program. So aussiespecialist.com, that is Tourism Australia's platform for all the states and territories throughout Australia. Make sure you go check out the South Australia one on there, and then give us a like on social media for funny videos of kangaroos, koalas and sea lions.
And I think from my point of view, Graham, you're right. I think the winner probably starts with the South, and I think it's probably easy enough to say the winner is probably going to be SA. After all this, and just like Dan said, we've got our little digits there as well, or not the digits like the phone number, but southafrica.net/trade for anything trade related. You've got the latest updates with everything that's happening news-wise too. saspecialist.southafrica.net, that is our national training service, of course. Just like Aussie Specialist, you can get all your badges and go through different modules and all that sort of stuff as well. Our hashtag is Meet South Africa. If you have never been down there before and you get the chance, or sending your clients down, please make sure they hashtag that, and then we can use all of their lovely content, which is always nice and handy. And then at South Africa for both Twitter and Instagram is us.
Marvellous. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You seem to have escaped without too many bruises.
Yes.
Well
Always
done.
important. I'm
We
glad
look, we look forward to the rematch.
Thank you very much, Graham. SA was the winner.
SA was
Absolutely.
definitely the winner.
Thanks
Cheers.
so much for having us.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.